In what was easily one of the most entertaining Bristol races ever, Denny Hamlin emerges victorious. His fourth win at Bristol Motor Speedway, and a night that I think we'll be talking about, or a day and an afternoon that we'll be talking about for quite some time in the Food City 500. I'm Doug Rice, of course, as always, with Alexis Erickson, and Jeff Hammond is in the house. And Alexis, we will start with you. First off, let's talk about Denny Hamlin. He's the fifth different winner this year. He's already locked himself into the playoffs, and his stats just keep getting fatter and fatter.
They do, yeah. Obviously we saw Toyotas kind of rise to the occasion last week in Phoenix, and we were looking for more of that, and they certainly didn't disappoint. I think at one portion of the race, all four Joe Gibbs Toyotas were 1, 2, 3, 4, so they brought it to Bristol just like they did a week ago. And, Denny Hamlin, it's his kind of racetrack. The race, we'll talk a little bit more about how it played out, but it played out certainly in his favor. And having a fast race car and the Toyotas that they brought and Joe Gibbs Racing brought certainly helped, but also just the style of racing that we had yesterday really played into his hands, and he took full advantage of that. And
talking about the style, Denny Hamlin said he had to use a little brain power in this one.
It was a chess match. I mean, there was a time where me and the 5 were up front, and I was on the outside, and he was leading, and I could tell he was just really going slow. And I told the spotter, hey, we want to just run side by side, I'm good with that. Let's just block both lanes and back up the whole field, because it was a chess match. But, I didn't realize till later that the line I was running was just killing my tires. So you learned on the fly, and you just made adjustments. And each run we made, we just got a little better.
Jeff Hammond, I thought it was fascinating that at one point, especially early in the race, it was almost a conscious decision, or it was a conscious decision to say, I don't want to lead, you go ahead and lead.
No, anything you could do to kind of slow the pace down or get in a rhythm to where you could save your race car was very important yesterday. And who did the best job? Denny Hamlin, obviously, because he came out with the win, led a lot of laps. He showed he had the right kind of discipline and at the right kind of pacing throughout the entire day. So, yeah, I would say he definitely had his chess game set match.
Yeah, he did. He had everybody in check before the end of the race. He led 163 laps. His teammate Ty Gibbs, 137. Martin Truex Jr., 54. Christopher Bell, 29. Alexis Erickson for the win. What do all four of those drivers have in common?
Toyota.
Yeah.
Toyota drivers. Yeah, big day for Toyota.
Big day for Toyota.
Second week in a row.
Big day for Toyota, big day for Joe Gibbs Racing. And as you pointed out, and I know we said it on the broadcast several times, there were big stretches during this race, Jeff, where all four of the Joe Gibbs Toyotas were running 1, 2, 3, 4, and a lot of times in that, it was the Toyota of John Hunter Nemechek that was in fifth.
Yeah, I mean, it was really a marked improvement across the board, no matter who you were driving for. It looked like if you had that sombrero on the front nose, you had a good race car. And that was the one thing that it was so impressive to me at Daytona. It was like, Toyotas aren't fast. Wonder how they're going to do during the race. I think they're starting to get a little bit of momentum because Denny qualified third like he did. He showed speed. He also showed consistency. And this is something we're starting to pick up on, at least I am, that Toyota, not only did they change their nose, they've got a piece that can race on the super speedways, but at the same time, they've got a great short track car.
And at the end of the day, it was a couple of the old hat veterans that ruled the day. It was, of course, Denny Hamlin winning. Martin Truex, once again, second at Bristol. Denny says it was still a challenging day.
Yeah, it was challenging, but it was a different kind of challenge for sure. Certainly something that we've not had to do for a very long time in managing tires. So once it got into that tire management type of race, certainly my history in late models where you had to do that big time, it certainly paid off.
All right, I wanted to get at least 5 minutes into the show before we started talking about tires. So Denny kind of opened the door there. He used that phrase, tire management.
Well, it's kind of funny because I'm sitting here listening to Jeff, and even I mentioned it, how the Toyotas were really strong, and we talked about last week. But I'm wondering, after watching the complexion of the race yesterday and what happened with the tires, the fact that, there was what I heard several people call extreme wear on the tires, where you'd run about 50 laps and then they'd kind of fall off a cliff. And in order to be good yesterday and to get a good good finish. You really had to kind of navigate that on the fly, because a lot of teams didn't expect that to happen once the race started, and so they had to learn as they went and modify their strategy depending on how they wanted to attack the fact that the tires were falling off. How much of a read can we really get on the Toyotas or any car really yesterday, because of the fact that it was more in the driver's hands than it has ever really been before?
It all goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. It came back to the fact of having a balanced race car and having the guy smart enough behind the wheel to take advantage of a balanced race car. People are going to sit there and say, I can't believe they did this to Bristol. I can't believe they did this. What kind of race was that? It was the kind of race that I think you've already heard from our winner that he enjoyed. It was a challenge like they've never seen in recent years. And I say that with a little bit of tongue in cheek, because when you go to Darlington, what do? We don't race each other. We race the racetrack. We realize how tires are very sensitive, even at a place like that. We're just not used to seeing it Bristol. We're always saying Bristol, Bristol, baby, you got to run Mach 1 around a doggone, basically like what Ken Schrader said one time, flying jet planes inside of a gymnasium. So you always think about you're just kind of up against it and running wide open. We saw, Doug, a very paced, very disciplined race. Even the cautions, there weren't as many as they could have been.
There weren't as many as you thought there would be. There were only 9 cautions. I say only 9, 7 for cause. After that second caution, there were 2 pretty quick, lap 24, lap 33. Then we got to lap 71, and that's when it all broke loose, and we saw all these corded tires and tires that just disintegrated. But I want to make this point. Yeah, that was bad, and that looked bad, but that's the only time during the race that we saw Alexis, everybody coming in, and the tires were just falling apart. The teams made adjustments.
They did. Yeah, they absolutely did. I mean, it just shows you the level and the caliber of talent that races in the NASCAR Cup Series, because they saw a problem, something was happening, and they adjusted their strategy to be able to stay in the game. Now, clearly, when the race started, there were some teams that had no idea what was going to happen. I mean, I think Tyler Reddick was left out there on, he took no tires at one point, and that was definitely the wrong decision to make.
Don't do that.
But to be fair, it was early in the race, and maybe they just hadn't figured that out yet, and they were, and it was unfortunate circumstance for them that they made that decision. But yeah, I mean, you had to learn on the fly. You had to kind of go with maybe some old school knowledge. Some of these drivers, Denny Hamlin specifically, talked about going back to his roots in short track racing. I mean, go to any local short track, and 9 times out of 10, that's the race you have to run.
Well, the thing is right now, folks, look at the top 3 finishers: Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., and Brad Keselowski. 3 champions with a lot of experience, and they reacted accordingly, and they allowed their experience to take over and that patience not to get themselves in trouble.
So I heard a stat this morning on Sirius XM that I hadn't heard before, is that those 3 drivers that finished 1, 2, 3 are the 3 oldest drivers in the field. And that's probably no coincidence.
Okay. There's not. Yeah.
No, it's not coincidence.
Yeah.
It is. It's a situation where all of a sudden you want to know who rose to the top. It's the guys who had been there before and understood when somebody goes blowing by you, let them go.
Yeah.
They're coming back to me sooner or later. We've seen this a lot of times at different racetracks throughout the history of the sport. We're just so accustomed to not seeing it now that this kind of caught us all a little bit off guard. And I think we need to touch on the fact there was a lot of debate during the course of the race. Was it the resin? Or was it the lack of the PJ1? I mean, what was the catalyst for this? Doug, just understand, Goodyear brought a softer tire they wanted to wear, thinking it would give better grip.
It's the same tire that they had there last year for the night race.
They came out and made a statement that it was the same tire.
But at the same time, when they did that a year ago, and I told my guys when I got to the racetrack this year, remember, this is the first time in 3 years we have seen this racetrack clean like this. We've had dirt on it the last 3 years. Every racetrack changes throughout the entire season, and so does Bristol. What you see here in the spring, you will see different in the fall and in the summer race.
And one of the other contributing factors, and I talked to Steve Swift, he's head of development for Speedway Motorsports. He came by our booth and he goes, remember this, guys? He said, when we were up here in the fall last year, we had ARCA cars here, we had trucks, we had Xfinity cars, and all of that going out on the track before the Cup cars ever hit it. They had a short truck race and a couple of practice sessions. They were about 600 or 700 laps short of cars being on that racetrack from what they were last year.
And night racing too, Doug.